Have you ever wondered why the ones who are least available are the ones most deeply desired? Why the doors that remain slightly ajar haunt us more than those thrown wide open? There is a reason your soul hesitates when you're too accessible, too visible, too easily held. Something in you remembers, not logically but archetypally, that what is truly valuable is never found in plain sight. And yet we are taught to always be open, friendly, inviting. But what if this invitation is the very reason your presence has lost its gravity? Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But perhaps the most dangerous thing is to make yourself too available before you've truly found yourself. What if your constant accessibility is a defense mechanism, not of courage, but of fear? What if the need to be liked, to be chosen, is actually a subtle betrayal of the self? The more you chase connection, the more you dilute your essence. The question isn't why people pull away when you're too kind. The real question is, who are you when you stop reaching? And what version of yourself emerges in the silence of withdrawal? There is a hidden alchemy that takes place when you become elusive, not out of arrogance but as a declaration of inner sovereignty. The world has always feared what it cannot fully possess, and in that fear lies fascination. The unreachable awakens projections, myths, obsessions. You stop being a person and become a mirror, a symbol, a question they cannot answer. But here's the twist. It is in your absence, not your presence, that others begin to see themselves. Are you ready to become that mirror? This isn't about playing games. This is about reclaiming the sacred distance that awakens respect, mystery, and magnetism. In the language of the psyche, closeness without boundaries is invasion, not intimacy. The unconscious does not fall in love with the familiar. It falls in love with the unknown. When you stop flooding the world with access, when you step back, the archetype of the sage, the enigma, the sacred other begins to rise from within you. And with it, something else awakens in those around you. A hunger they can't name. So now, the question isn't whether you should be more approachable. The real question is, what happens to your identity, your power, your destiny, and when you're not? And as we descend into the layers beneath this surface, one truth will become undeniable. Your presence was never meant to be given freely. It was meant to be earned. And by the end of this video, you'll begin to see why. But only if you stay. Every second you skip might be the one that finally reveals the shadow you've been trying to outrun. They told you to be kind, to smile more, to make yourself open, soft, accessible. From the earliest moments of your life, this message was etched into your skin like an invisible tattoo. That your worth was measured not by the strength of your boundaries, but by the ease with which others could cross them. But somewhere, between saying yes too often and staying silent just to keep the peace, something inside you began to fracture. Not in a loud, cinematic way. No. It happened quietly, like a slow leak in the soul. You became too transparent, too reachable, too easy to grasp. And in that ease, you were slowly forgotten. There is a certain discomfort that rises the moment you begin to retreat, not from others, but from the compulsion to be accepted. And with that retreat, something primal awakens. Not arrogance, not coldness, but a whisper from your unconscious, one that sounds strangely like truth. Jung would call it the shadow, not as an enemy, but as the part of you that has been neglected in your pursuit of love. What if your constant availability is not an act of connection, but a symptom of fear? The fear of being invisible. The fear of rejection. The fear that your value depends on how useful, how pleasant, how present you are. But let me ask you this. Who are you when you stop reaching? What emerges in the silence you once tried to fill with performance? You start to see it in the smallest things. In the way people stop looking you in the eyes when you're always there. In how your words, no matter how sincere, become background noise. Overexposure breeds blindness. Mystery is the currency of desire, and without it, presence becomes weightless. There's an archetype inside you, the wounded lover, who gives everything hoping to be seen. But the more you give, the more invisible you become. The unconscious does not crave what is offered freely. It craves what must be earned, what is hidden, what carries the scent of risk. You think being liked will save you, but it is being respected, even feared, even misunderstood, that actually preserves your soul. Have you ever noticed how absence creates a particular kind of presence? A silence that says more than words? A felt sense of someone who is not physically there, but still lingers like smoke after fire? This is the essence of becoming unreachable, not out of bitterness, but out of self-possession. The world does not chase what it can easily hold. It becomes obsessed with what slips through its fingers, and in that space between approach and distance, something sacred is born. You no longer live to be chosen. You become the one who chooses. You stop flooding the world with access and start radiating something far more dangerous: mystery. And mystery does not scream. It waits. It watches. It remembers its own worth. Deep down, you always knew. There has always been a part of you that resisted the demand to be constantly open, but it was silenced by conditioning, by loneliness, by the aching hunger to belong. Now that part returns, not as a thought, as a tension, as a tiredness, as a sacred discomfort, because being endlessly available is a slow erosion of identity, not of your body, but of your soul. And when you vanish from yourself, no one else can find you either. Not even those who say they love you, because love without distance becomes consumption, and what is consumed too quickly is never truly digested, never understood, never honored. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when you realize the world does not miss you for who you are, but for how you made them feel. It is a rupture, a psychological splinter beneath the skin. You begin to see how often presence is not about being seen, but about being used. How many times did they reach for you, not out of love, but out of habit? Not to witness your truth, but to ease their own emptiness? The mask of connection slips when you become still. And in that stillness, you begin to feel the ache of having been needed for all the wrong reasons. You were available, and so you were taken for granted. But now that you're not, everything shifts. You are no longer a utility. You are an absence that echoes, and echoes haunt. Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But what happens when you stop distracting them from that task? When you remove your light from their dark corridors? They are left alone, not with you, but with themselves. And that is terrifying, because you were a shield, a distraction, a mirror that reflected only what they could tolerate. But your withdrawal breaks the spell. It returns the projection to the sender. And with that return comes confusion, discomfort, even resentment. They will say you've become cold, detached. But what they really mean is, now I have to feel myself, and I don't know how to do that without you softening the noise. This is the cost of becoming whole. You lose the roles that once gave you a false sense of identity: the caretaker, the empath, the peacemaker. You wore these like armor, believing they made you valuable. But they were disguises, subtle betrayals of your deeper self. And the deeper self does not beg to be loved. It does not overexpose. It does not barter its silence for attention. It watches. It waits. It selects. It knows that in the language of the soul, availability without discernment is self-abandonment. So as you step into this new form, this untouchable, unreachable essence, you feel both powerful and profoundly alone. Not because no one is there, but because you are no longer offering yourself as a shelter for their storms. There is a sacred violence in transformation, a quiet burning of the bridges you once called home. You begin to remember things you never consciously knew, that your presence is not neutral. It affects. It activates. It awakens what others try to keep dormant. And when that awakening is no longer wrapped in accessibility, it becomes piercing. People start to feel the weight of what they never truly saw in you. Not because you changed, but because your silence made your truth louder. This is where myth begins, when you're no longer just a person but a symbol, an energy, an archetype. You become what they cannot define, and so they project, they fantasize, they chase, but they cannot hold. And there's grief in that, too. Because part of you wants to be held, not as a projection, not as a fantasy, but as you are, in your full, complex, untamed being. And you wonder, will anyone ever meet me there, in this unreachable place where my soul breathes freely? Or am I destined to be seen only in fragments, always too much or not enough, too far or too close? This is the riddle of the one who dares to become sovereign, to stand fully in the self, even when it costs connection. But here's the hidden truth. The ones who are meant for you will not fear your distance. They will honor it. They will not chase your shadow. They will sit in their own until they can meet you eye to eye, without needing to possess what they revere. And when that moment comes, if it comes, you will know. Because the energy will not pull. It will rest. It will not beg for access. It will match your stillness. And in that stillness, a new kind of intimacy is born. One that does not devour. One that does not dilute. But one that sees. Completely. Quietly. Without reaching. Without taking. Just being. In the mystery of each other's presence. That is the real meaning of connection. Not the endless transaction of attention, but the sacred tension of two whole beings who do not fear distance, because they have already found home within. There is a certain stillness that follows the storm of becoming. It is not peace in the way the world defines it, not quiet, not comfort, not a return to ease. It is a silence with weight, a presence that hovers. It is the aftertaste of reclamation. You've stopped apologizing for your distance. You've stopped dressing your truth in softness so others can digest it without choking. And in that refusal, you have entered a space very few ever dare to walk, the terrain of sacred detachment. Here the air is different, time slows. You are no longer measuring your worth by how much others need you. You are now listening, deeply, to the needs you silenced in yourself to be needed. And what you hear may scare you. There is a hunger in you that you've numbed, a wildness, a rage, a longing, a knowing. It has been buried beneath years of performance, under layers of politeness and emotional labor. But now, as your availability fades, that buried self begins to rise. Not like a child asking to be seen, but like a god returning from exile. This is not the self that seeks validation. This is the self that remembers. The one who does not ask, but claims. The one who does not beg to be touched, but radiates, such gravity that the world cannot help but orbit in awe. And it changes you, not just in how you move, but in what you allow, in what you expect, in what you will never again tolerate. And suddenly you begin to see how rare presence truly is. Not presence of body, but of essence. You begin to see how most people never really arrive. They just show up. They speak, but they do not reveal. They touch, but they do not feel. They look at you, but they do not see. And in this new space you occupy, this unreachable space, you stop confusing closeness with connection. You realize that the ones who truly find you are not the loudest. They are the quiet ones, the ones who don't chase, the ones who recognize your withdrawal not as rejection, but as an invitation to rise to your level, to meet you in the realm of presence, not proximity. And you begin to trust that you no longer need to lower your frequency to be loved. But it's not easy. The temptation returns. The old wounds whisper. The child in you still wants to be chosen, still wants to be praised, still wants to be adored without having to shrink to fit into someone else's idea of enough. And so, you grieve again. Not because you're broken, but because healing always brings mourning. Mourning for the years you betrayed yourself to be accepted. Mourning for the intimacy you gave to those who never earned it. mourning for the power you dimmed to make others feel safe. But in that grief there is fire, and that fire forges something unshakable, a presence that is no longer transactional, a love that is no longer addictive, a self that is no longer for sale. This is where the unreachable becomes sacred, not because you have vanished, but because you have finally become whole. And wholeness does not scream. It vibrates. It doesn't need to be explained. It is felt, like a storm that never arrives but whose pressure shapes everything in its path. And so you walk differently, you love differently, you exist differently, not above others, not against them, but from a depth they may not yet know how to swim in. And that's okay. You are no longer responsible for who drowns in your silence. You are responsible only for not drowning in your own noise. You are no longer a lighthouse for those who refuse to open their eyes. You are the ocean, vast, mysterious, sovereign. So let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. Let them misunderstand your silence as absence. What they cannot name, they cannot reduce. What they cannot hold, they cannot harm. And what they cannot access, they cannot drain. You are no longer here to be reachable. You are here to be real. And realness in a world addicted to illusion will always be mistaken for danger. But it is not you they fear. It is their own reflection in the space you no longer fill. In your distance, they are forced to see themselves. And in that mirror, everything they've avoided becomes impossible to ignore. And so you stand here, not at the end, but at the threshold. A place that does not ask for answers, only for presence. Everything you thought you needed to be, the one who explains, who proves, who pleases, lies behind you now, like skin you've outgrown. What remains is raw, intact, and whole. Not polished, but real. Not available, but alive. You've walked through the fire of your own patterns, and now you hold something unnameable in your hands. The weight of your own unspoken depth. Look around, not with your eyes, but with your silence. What do you see differently now? Can you feel how the space within you has stretched? How the echo of your own being rings louder when you stop filling the silence with performance? There is a beauty here, a sacred, dangerous kind of beauty, that only reveals itself when you are no longer trying to be understood. You are not a door to be opened by anyone. You are a temple, and temples are not approached casually. They are approached with reverence or not at all. You have not become distant. You have become dimensional. You are not colder. You are clearer. And this clarity frightens those who once thrived on your confusion. They will call your evolution withdrawal when in truth, it is emergence. They will say you've changed, when, in truth, you've returned. Returned to the unshakable center that lives beneath the roles, beneath the noise, beneath the ache to be chosen. And now, something timeless within you remembers. What is unreachable is not lonely. It is sacred, because it belongs first to itself. Let this truth settle in your bones, that you no longer owe the world your constant accessibility. What you owe is your integrity, and integrity does not whisper through an open window. It stands at the threshold and waits. For those who are ready to enter with soul, not strategy, with humility, not hunger, with eyes that see beyond the form and into the field, because only those who can honor your stillness without needing to break it are worthy of hearing the music it carries. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be experienced, slowly, deliberately, and without dilution. The ones who cannot sit in the echo of your absence will never understand the richness of your presence. And that is not your burden. It is your liberation. Let them reach for what they cannot grasp. Let them misunderstand the outline of your silence. For it is in that misunderstanding that your essence becomes legend. You are not a memory. You are a myth in motion. There will be moments when the old pull returns, when the temptation to explain, to soften, to reach out knocks gently at your ribs. But pause. Breathe. Listen not to the noise of others, but to the wisdom that blooms in solitude. The world has enough noise. What it lacks is depth. And your distance is not a wound. It is a mirror. One that reflects not just who you are, but who they might become, if only they dared to meet you where you are. So now, as the final notes of this story vibrate through the hollow spaces of the unseen, ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped trying to be reachable and instead became unforgettable? What would awaken in you if you let yourself be rare, unapologetically? What kind of love, what kind of life, what kind of presence would you magnetize if you stopped begging to be let in and started becoming the door no one could ignore? Because the truth is, you were never meant to be easily held. You were meant to be remembered. And if something inside you stirred, if a part of you woke up during this journey even quietly, then let that part breathe. Don't rush to explain it, just feel it. Let it linger, let it question, let it echo. Now, if this resonated, not just as a video, but as something deeper, I invite you to take the next step, not out of habit, but from the center of your own awakening. Subscribe to Archimind not as a follower, but as a co-journeyer. Like this video not to show support, but to mark the place where something shifted in you. And share it only if you know someone standing at their own threshold, aching for a truth they have not yet found the words to name. Because some videos inform, but this one was meant to remind. And reminders are the most dangerous kind of magic.